Madison Bennett smiled into the microphone and called her own sister a burden in front of more than 200 donors. Then my mother lifted her champagne glass, my father hid a grin behind his napkin, and my 7-year-old daughter asked me why our family was laughing at us. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 34 years old, a fraud investigator in Seattle, and the woman my family liked to introduce only when they needed someone to blame. That night, I sat at the last table near the emergency exit of the Portland Grand Atrium, close enough to smell the lemon polish on the service carts, far enough from the stage to understand exactly where my family believed I belonged. The room glittered like a jewelry box. Crystal lights poured gold across white orchids. Silver forks chimed against porcelain plates. Men in tailored jackets leaned toward women in pearl earrings, whispering about donations, politics, and reputation. On every wall, screens displayed the name of my sister's charity, Bright Harbor Foundation, in elegant blue letters. Madison had built her entire image on saving vulnerable children. And yet my own child was sitting in the shadows, clutching a sketchbook to her chest. Nora wore a simple navy dress I had pressed twice before we left home. Her dark hair was tied with a ribbon that kept slipping loose. She had spent the first half of the evening drawing little houses with round windows and gardens full of sunflowers. Every few minutes, she looked toward the stage with the soft hope of a child who still believed family meant safety. I knew better, but I had brought her anyway. I had told myself we would survive one dinner. I had told myself Madison would be too busy performing kindness for strangers to turn her cruelty toward us. I had told myself my parents, Diane and Richard Bennett, would at least behave with dignity in front of the mayor. I was wrong. Madison stood beneath the spotlight in a silver gown that shimmered every time she moved. She looked flawless. That was her talent. She could wrap a knife in silk and make people applaud the shine. She thanked the donors. She thanked the board. She thanked Mayor Adrian Cole, who sat at the center table with his hands folded and his eyes calm. Then Madison turned her head. Her gaze traveled past the wealthy guests, past the cameras, past every polished smile in the room, until it landed on me. My stomach tightened. She smiled wider. Of course, I must thank my family, she said, her voice warm and theatrical. My parents taught me what ambition looks like. They taught me never to settle, never to become someone who drains everyone around her. A few people chuckled softly, unsure whether they had permission. Madison gave them permission. Take my older sister, Claire, for example. She is a single mother. Divorced. Always struggling. Always needing sympathy. Honestly, she is a beautiful reminder to every woman in this room. Do not become a burden. The laughter came like cold rain. Not everyone laughed loudly. Some looked down at their plates. Some froze with their wine glasses halfway to their mouths. But enough people laughed for Nora to hear it. Enough people laughed for my mother to lift her glass and say, "Some people simply make poor choices." Enough people laughed for my father to lower his eyes and smile like he had just watched a private joke finally performed for an audience. Nora's fingers found mine under the table. "Mommy," she whispered, "why is Grandma smiling?" That question entered me like a blade. I work with lies for a living. I study signatures, claims, hidden payments, quiet fraud. I know how people disguise theft as paperwork and cruelty as concern. I had faced angry executives, dishonest contractors, and men twice my size who thought a raised voice could scare me away from the truth. But nothing had prepared me for my daughter's trembling voice. I pushed my chair back. My only thought was to get Nora out before Madison could say another word. I reached for her sketchbook. My hand was steady, but my heart was breaking so hard I could barely breathe. Then a chair scraped across the marble floor. The sound cut through the laughter. Mayor Adrian Cole stood up. The room changed instantly. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died. Madison blinked, still smiling, but the smile had begun to crack at the edges. Adrian walked toward the stage with slow, deliberate steps. He did not look angry. That made him more frightening. He looked like a man who had finally confirmed something he had suspected for a long time. Madison tried to laugh. "Mayor Cole," she said lightly, "I was just telling a family story." Adrian reached the microphone. He did not snatch it. He simply held out his hand. For one frozen second, Madison hesitated. Then she gave it to him. Adrian turned toward the room. His eyes found Nora first, then me. "A charity that claims to protect children," he said, voice low and clear, "cannot be led by a woman who humiliates a child to entertain donors." Madison's face went pale. My mother's glass lowered. My father stopped smiling. Adrian continued, and every word landed like a door locking shut. "Effective immediately, my office is suspending all funding discussions with Bright Harbor Foundation pending a full review of its leadership, conduct, and financial records." The room went silent. Not embarrassed silent. Terrified silent. And in that silence, I saw something I had missed all night. Madison was not afraid of losing applause. My parents were not afraid of shame. They were afraid of what a financial review might find. I looked down at Nora and squeezed her hand. For the first time that evening, I was no longer the woman hidden by the exit. I was the one person in that room who knew how to follow a paper trail. Growing up, I learned that some families do not raise children equally. They assign roles. One child becomes the trophy on the mantle. The other becomes the broom kept behind the door. In our house, Madison was the trophy. She was 5 years younger than me, with bright eyes, a sweet voice, and a gift for becoming exactly what adults wanted to see. When relatives visited, she twirled in the living room and made everyone clap. When my father's business friends came over, she shook their hands and smiled like a little politician. My mother, Diane, would place one hand on Madison's shoulder and say, "This one is going somewhere." Then she would look at me and add, "Claire is practical." Practical. That was the soft word they used for invisible. By the time I was 16, I knew how to cook dinner, balance household bills, sort receipts for my father's construction company, and calm my mother when her headaches turned into storms. Richard Bennett did not believe in hiring help if he had a daughter at home with steady hands and good grades. He would drop a cardboard box of invoices on the kitchen table and say, "You are good with details. Make yourself useful." Madison, meanwhile, was never asked to be useful. She was asked to be impressive. My parents paid for her debate coach, her voice lessons, her pageant dresses, her summer leadership camps. They called those things investments. When I needed a used laptop for college applications, my father told me money did not grow on trees. 2 weeks later, Madison received a new designer purse because Diane said confidence was important for a young woman. I built my life from what they overlooked. I studied late at night while the house slept. I learned numbers because numbers did not flatter, forget, or pretend. Numbers told the truth even when people lied. That was how I became a fraud investigator. I learned long before my first professional case that every family has a ledger. Not always on paper. Sometimes it is written in who gets protected, who gets blamed, and who is expected to stay quiet. When my marriage ended, that ledger became crueler. I was 27, holding Nora against my chest, so tired my bones felt hollow. My husband had walked away from our small apartment, from overdue bills, from a baby who still smelled like milk and sleep. I did not go to my parents for money. I went because, for one foolish moment, I wanted a mother. Diane sat across from me in her cream-colored living room and looked at Nora like she was a complication. "You need to fix your life quickly, Claire," she said. "People are talking." My father did not even turn off the television. Madison called the next morning. I thought perhaps she would ask if I was all right. Instead, she sighed and said, "You always make everything so heavy." That sentence followed me for years. Heavy. Practical. Difficult. Burden. Those were the names they gave me so they would never have to call me strong. I returned to Seattle and worked until my eyes burned. I took insurance fraud cases no one else wanted. I sat across from men who lied about injuries, companies that inflated losses, contractors who invented damage after storms. I learned the smell of a false story. I learned that guilty people often talk too much, smile too hard, and keep documents just clean enough to look dirty. So when Madison created Bright Harbor Foundation, I noticed things others ignored. Her sudden wealth did not match her salary. Her charity events became grander than the donations could explain. My father's struggling construction company began appearing as a sponsor at her galas. My mother started wearing new jewelry while complaining about medical bills. Every time I asked a small question, the room changed temperature. "Stop being suspicious," Diane snapped once. Richard leaned back in his chair and said, "Not everything is an investigation, Claire. But everything becomes an investigation when people hide the truth badly." The first time I met Mayor Adrian Cole, it was at a private family dinner arranged to impress him. Madison wanted city funding. My parents wanted influence. Adrian wanted to understand who he was dealing with. He watched more than he spoke. When Diane interrupted me every time I mentioned my work, his eyes narrowed. When Richard praised Madison's compassion but ignored Nora's drawing on the table, Adrian noticed. When Nora dropped a crayon and Madison told her not to crawl under the table like a stray puppy, Adrian stood before I could move. He picked up the crayon, handed it to my daughter, and asked what she was drawing. "A house," Nora said shyly. Adrian smiled. "Every child should have a safe one." I remember that sentence because my mother looked frightened when he said it. 3 weeks before the gala, Diane came to my apartment unannounced. She looked around at my second-hand furniture as if poverty were contagious. She told me to wear something dark, to keep Nora quiet, and to stay out of photographs. Madison needed the night to look perfect, she said. Important people would be watching. I should have stayed home. But Nora was listening from the hallway, holding her stuffed rabbit. I could not teach my daughter that. Cruel people get to decide where we are allowed to stand. So I bought a simple dress. I packed Nora's sketchbook. I walked into that glittering room with my head high. I thought we had been invited as family. I understand now. We were invited as proof of Madison's superiority. And they never imagined that the woman they called a burden had spent her whole life learning how to read the weight of a lie. Mayor Adrian Cole did not raise his voice, but the entire room obeyed him as if he had struck a gavel. His words hung above the ballroom, cold and bright. Effective immediately, all funding discussions with Bright Harbor Foundation were suspended. Pending a full review. Leadership. Conduct. Financial records. Financial records. That was the phrase that changed the air. Madison stood under the spotlight with the microphone no longer in her hand, her silver gown trembling around her knees. The woman who had built a career on polished speeches suddenly had no words. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like she was trying to breathe through glass. Adrian turned once more toward the donors. "I apologize to every guest who came here tonight in good faith," he said. "Generosity deserves integrity. Children deserve protection. And public trust is not a decoration for a gala stage." Then he stepped down. No dramatic exit. No shouting. No performance. Just a man walking away from a table where the flowers cost more than most families spend on groceries in a month. The silence broke slowly. A chair shifted. A woman coughed. Someone near the front whispered, "Did he just cancel the funding?" Another guest reached for his phone. Across the room, the board members of Bright Harbor Foundation looked at one another with the pale, startled faces of people realizing the floor beneath them was not marble, but thin ice. Madison moved first. "Mayor Cole," she called, her voice too bright, too sharp. "Adrian. Please. This is a misunderstanding." He did not turn around. That was when my mother rose from her chair. Diane Bennett had always believed panic was something poor people showed in public. But fear tore through her manners like a match through paper. Her champagne glass wobbled in her hand. Her pearls bounced against her throat. Richard stood beside her, his jaw locked, his eyes already searching for someone to blame. Not Madison. Never Madison. His gaze found me. I was still at the last table with Nora pressed against my side. My daughter had stopped crying, but her face was damp, and that hurt me more than the tears. Tears move. Dampness stays. It clings to a child's skin like proof. We are leaving, I whispered. Nora nodded without speaking. I picked up her sketchbook, tucked it under my arm, and guided her between the service carts and the back wall. We almost reached the lobby before my mother's voice cut through the noise. Claire. One word. My name. But in her mouth, it sounded like an accusation. I kept walking. Claire Bennett, stop right now. Nora's hand tightened in mine. I turned only because I would not let my daughter think I was running. Diane crossed the lobby in fast, furious steps. Richard followed behind her, his face red above his collar. Madison appeared last, silver dress gathered in both hands, makeup perfect except for the terror sitting naked in her eyes. What did you say to him? Madison hissed. I looked at her. I had expected tears. I had expected excuses. I had not expected that much hatred that quickly. I did not say anything to him. Liar, Diane snapped. You sat there all night pretending to be wounded. You wanted him to pity you. Richard stepped closer. His voice dropped into the tone he used with employees he wanted to frighten. You need to fix this. You need to speak to the mayor before this gets out of control. I stared at my father, amazed by the machinery of his mind. His younger daughter had humiliated a child on a stage, the mayor had suspended a public funding review, donors were whispering behind velvet curtains, and somehow I was the problem. There is nothing for me to fix, I said. Madison laughed once. It was an ugly, broken sound. You have always wanted my life, she said. You could not stand seeing me respected. Nora moved behind my leg. That small movement ended the conversation for me. I leaned down, lifted my daughter into my arms, and felt her bury her face against my shoulder. She was too old to be carried easily, but that night she felt weightless, as if fear had hollowed her out. Adrian did not leave because of me, I said quietly. He left because he saw you. Diane flinched. Richard's face hardened. Madison's eyes filled, not with shame, but with calculation. I should have recognized that look sooner. By the time Nora and I reached our apartment in Seattle, the attack had already begun. My phone vibrated across the kitchen counter before I even took off my coat. Messages appeared one after another. Cousins. Aunts. Former family friends. People who had ignored me for years suddenly had moral opinions about my character. How could you sabotage your sister? Jealousy is a disease. Everyone knows you wanted attention. I opened Madison's social media page and saw the lie sitting at the top like a fresh wound. She had posted a black and white photo of herself wiping tears from her face. Beneath it, she claimed the gala had been destroyed by a painful betrayal. She wrote that I had spent weeks manipulating Mayor Cole, feeding him private family stories, trying to poison him against her because I was bitter, lonely, and desperate for relevance. She did not deny what she said on stage. She rewrote it. According to Madison, her speech was not cruelty. It was heartbreak. She had simply cracked under the pressure of my jealousy. I stood in my kitchen, reading every word while Nora slept down the hall. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tear the lie apart sentence by sentence. Then my training took over. Liars love noise. Noise blurs facts. So I did not respond. I took screenshots. The post. The comments. The timestamps. The messages. Diane defending Madison. Richard accusing me of destroying the family. Every insult became evidence. Every lie became a document. I created a folder on my laptop and named it Bright Harbor Timeline. The next morning, an unknown Portland number called. I almost ignored it. Then something in me, the quiet investigator who had survived every room where people underestimated her, told me to answer. "Claire Bennett," I said. There was a pause. "This is Adrian Cole." I stepped into the hallway and closed the kitchen door behind me. His voice was calm, but heavier than it had been at the gala. "I am sorry for what happened to your daughter," he said. "But I am calling because what happened last night confirmed something my office was already investigating." My hand tightened around the phone. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly. "Bright Harbor's expense reports do not make sense. Several charity reimbursements appear to connect to your father's construction company. And Claire, your name appears on documents tied to those claims." The hallway seemed to tilt. For one long second, I heard nothing but my own heartbeat. Then Adrian said the words that turned my family's cruelty into something far more dangerous. "I think they have been using you as their shield." I did not drive home. I drove like a woman following smoke toward a burning house. Adrian's words kept striking the inside of my skull. "Your name appears on documents. Your father's company. Charity reimbursements. Insurance claims." By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were cold around the steering wheel. Nora was still at school. The rooms were silent, washed in pale afternoon light. For years, silence had frightened me because it felt like abandonment. That day, it felt like a courtroom waiting for evidence. I locked the door, set my purse on the chair, and went straight to my small desk by the window. People think fraud announces itself with drama. It does not. Fraud arrives dressed as normal paperwork. A clean signature. A routine form. A familiar address typed into the wrong line. It hides in the places honest people are too tired to check. But I check everything. I opened my secure work laptop and began with my own records. Credit reports. Insurance portals. Public filings. State claim databases I could legally access through my credentials. I searched my name the way I would search a suspect's name, without mercy, without sentiment. The first false document appeared under a contractor liability claim linked to Bennett Ridge Construction, my father's company. My name was listed as an independent witness. I had never seen the job site. I had never spoken to the injured worker. Yet there was my signature at the bottom of the statement, neat and confident, pretending to be mine. My pulse slowed. That was the frightening part. I did not panic. I became still. I pulled up the next file. Then the next. 3 claims. 2 reimbursement requests. 1 supporting statement attached to a charity repair project Bright Harbor Foundation had supposedly funded for a children's shelter outside Portland. Supposedly. The shelter address was real. The repair work was not. Invoices from my father's company had been submitted through Madison's foundation. Insurance reimbursements had followed. Donation credits had been claimed. Public praise had been harvested. The money moved in a circle so polished it almost looked clean. Almost. I printed every page. The printer shuddered beside me, spitting out the bones of my family's lie. My father had used my name to make the claims appear verified. My mother's email address appeared in a forwarded chain approving language for the reports. Madison's digital signature sat on the foundation reimbursements, elegant and careless, like a queen signing decrees she never expected anyone to question. Then I found the deepest cut. A scanned identification form. My old address. My date of birth. My professional license number. My emergency contact listed as Diane Bennett. Attached to it was a copy of my signature, lifted from a document I had signed years earlier when I helped my father organize business taxes. I leaned back from the screen. For a moment, I saw myself at 16, sitting under a yellow kitchen light while Madison slept upstairs. I saw my father dropping boxes of receipts in front of me. I heard him say, "Make yourself useful." He had not been raising a daughter. He had been studying a resource. The apartment door rattled softly in the evening wind. I looked toward Nora's room. Her stuffed rabbit waited on the pillow. Her colored pencils were scattered across the floor. My family had used my name, my work, my silence, and nearly my child's safety to build Madison's shining lie. The old Claire might have cried. That woman was gone. I created 3 folders. Richard. Diane. Madison. Into Richard's folder went the forged witness statements, claim numbers, contractor invoices, and payment transfers. Into Diane's went the emails, the altered wording, the messages proving she knew exactly how the reports were being shaped. Into Madison's went the Bright Harbor reimbursements, gala expenses, donor statements, and the social media post accusing me of jealousy while she stood on top of stolen credibility. Then I made copies. Digital copies. Printed copies. Cloud backups. A sealed envelope for my attorney. A report for the state insurance fraud unit. By the time I picked Nora up from school, my face was calm enough that she did not worry. I made her grilled cheese. I listened to her read from a library book. I tucked her into bed and kissed the top of her head longer than usual. At 9 that night, someone pounded on my door. I already knew. Richard and Diane stood in the hallway. My father looked smaller without an audience, but his voice still tried to fill the room. My mother's eyes were red, not from guilt, but from fear. "You are going to fix this," Richard said, pushing past me. Diane placed a folded statement on my coffee table. "You will record an apology. Tonight. You will say Madison's post was true. You will say you misled Mayor Cole." I looked at the paper. Another script. Another noose. "No," I said. Richard's face hardened. Then he said the sentence that ended whatever blood tie remained between us. "If you refuse, we will tell the court you are unstable. We will fight for custody of Nora." The room went very quiet. For 1 second, rage burned so hot it nearly blinded me. Then I let my shoulders drop. I made my voice small. "Give me until tomorrow," I whispered. "Bring Madison. I will sign what you want, but I want to say it to her face." My parents exchanged a look of triumph. They thought the threat had broken me. After they left, I locked the door, walked to my desk, and placed the 3 folders in my briefcase. They did not know they had not cornered me. They had scheduled their own confession. The next afternoon, I walked into the private dining room of the Portland Crest Club wearing the black suit I reserved for hostile hearings. Richard had chosen the location carefully. Dark wood walls. White tablecloths. Quiet waiters. Expensive silence. He believed rooms like that belonged to men like him. Men who leaned back, lowered their voices, and expected women to obey. He was already seated when I arrived. Diane sat beside him, pale but polished. Madison wore a cream dress and a wounded expression she must have practiced in the mirror. On the table in front of her was a printed statement. My apology. Madison pushed it toward me with 2 fingers. "Read it exactly," she said. "Then post the video tonight. If you sound sincere enough, maybe I can still save the foundation." I sat across from them and placed my briefcase on my lap. Richard smiled, slow and satisfied. "Good girl, Claire. Finally being reasonable." Those words might have hurt me once. That day, they only confirmed the diagnosis. I opened the briefcase. The brass latches clicked like 2 small gunshots. Then I removed 3 thick folders and placed them on the table. One in front of Richard. One in front of Diane. One in front of Madison. "Open them," I said. Madison rolled her eyes first. Then she opened hers. I watched her face change. The color drained from her cheeks as she saw the Bright Harbor reimbursement forms, the false shelter invoices, the gala expenses marked as community outreach, the donor money that had paid for flowers, dresses, consultants, and polished lies. Diane made a small choking sound. Her folder held printed emails, approval notes, and revised language she had sent to make fraudulent claims look charitable. Richard opened his folder last. He saw the insurance claim numbers, the forged witness statements, the contractor invoices, the copied signature. My copied signature. The one he had stolen from a document I signed when I was young enough to still believe helping him might earn love. For the first time in my life, my father looked afraid of me. "What is this?" he whispered. "A record," I said. "The kind you cannot charm, threaten, or bury." Madison slammed her folder shut. "This proves nothing." I turned to her calmly. "It proves your foundation billed repair work that was never performed. It proves my father's company received money through false claims. It proves my mother helped shape the paperwork. And it proves my name was used without my consent." Richard leaned forward. His old voice returned, rough and commanding. "You listen to me. Families handle things privately." "No," I said. "Criminals prefer things privately." Diane began to cry. Not soft tears. Not motherly grief. Panic. Pure panic. "Claire, please. We made mistakes. Your father was under pressure. Madison needed the gala to succeed. We were going to fix it. You were going to frame me," I said. "You were going to call me unstable. You were going to threaten my child so I would protect your crimes." That silenced them. For a few seconds, all I heard was silverware from the main dining room and my own steady breathing. Then Richard reached for the folder. "Give me the originals." I did not move. "These are copies." His mouth tightened. "Where are the originals?" "With the State Insurance Fraud Unit," I said. "And with my attorney. And with Mayor Cole's Ethics Review Office." Madison stood so quickly her chair struck the wall. "You ruined me," she hissed. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the woman who had called me a burden beneath a ballroom spotlight. "No, Madison," I said quietly. "I documented you." Richard cursed. Diane sobbed harder. Madison began blaming him, saying she never understood the claims, never asked where the money came from, never meant for my name to be used. Richard turned on her at once. Diane tried to quiet them both. Their perfect family collapsed right there over white linen and untouched water glasses. I stood. For 34 years, I had mistaken endurance for love. I had believed that if I stayed calm enough, useful enough, forgiving enough, one day they would see me. But some people do not want to see you. They only want to spend what you are willing to lose. I picked up my briefcase. "You are no longer my family," I said. "You are defendants. And I am done paying your debts." 6 months later, Bright Harbor Foundation was dissolved. Madison resigned before the board could remove her. Richard's company lost its licenses and contracts. Diane sold her jewelry to pay legal fees. They did not go to prison, but they lost the one thing they worshipped most, reputation. As for Nora and me, we moved into a small house with a blue door and a maple tree in the front yard. She draws at the kitchen table now, in full sunlight. No corners. No shadows. No one laughing at her pain. Sometimes justice does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it sounds like a printer in a quiet room. Sometimes it looks like a woman finally gathering the papers, locking the door, and choosing her child over the people who raised her. If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to protect your peace from people who called themselves family? Like this video, subscribe to Still Waters Payback, and remember this: you are not a burden because someone else tried to spend your life.